think a lot of people don't tell you guys exactly what beginners and intermediate level mixers need to know the most, mostly because they don't remember what they do all the time because it's so second nature. And it's one of those things where if you grew up using analog gear, you forget what's so important because it's just part of it. It's like just brushing your teeth. It's part of mixing to the point where why would anyone need to tell you that you got to brush your teeth? It's just something everybody does. So here we go. Bottom line, what do I do all the time? I constantly look down at the meter that blares at me on my master bus processor, which is the same as like a mix bus compressor for anybody. In other words, like all your stuff in your session that you're mixing gets sent to a mix bus. Now, generally, the way I roll is everything goes to its own bus first, then to the mix bus. So if you think about it like this, all roads lead up to the mix bus, but the way they get there is the individual tracks, let's say a group of guitars, like 6 or 7 guitars, all go to a guitar bus, and the guitar bus goes to the mix bus. So the buses go to the mix bus. The tracks go to the buses that are about what the tracks are. So for example, 7 keyboards go to keyboard bus. You see what I'm saying? Keyboard bus goes to the mix bus. So when you think about it this way, what you realize is where you can raise or lower things when things are too loud. Because this is why your mixes aren't good. If you're a beginner or intermediate level person, it's most likely because you're not aware of how hard you're hitting things that you have on. Like mainly your mix bus processing. Like most people, all right, they have a compressor on their mix bus. This should be put on in the beginning of the whole situation. As soon as you start mixing, that's what goes on. Mix bus processing from the beginning, before you do anything. Because this way, you don't ever have to worry about it. You just leave it set, and then you're looking at it to see how much you're hitting the needle. And just like me, I have no choice but to look at it because it's on the desk, and when I hit it too hard, it flashes yellow. If I hit it way too hard, it's going to the red. So my goal is to keep it in the green and just to look at a little bit of gain reduction. And that's what I'm going to teach you guys, is just that's what you should be doing at your compressor level. Now, when I say compressor level, what I mean is like you could have compression, EQ, a limiter, all on your mix bus. It's like a lot of people have that, and a lot of them in that order. Compression, then an EQ, then a limiter, and then after that, some sort of PAZ analyzer so you can see what's going on. All right. Now, these are the things I look at the most. I look at the PAZ. Every time a lot of decisions have been made and my ears tick me off to like, what's going on there? Is something too loud? I look at it to see if stuff is sitting at the 0 line. That's usually what I look at it for. I don't look at it for like relativity between what to what, although maybe a little just to see like if there's way too much low end in the song and there's no mid-range, there's no high end, you'll have a ton of low end, like a huge hump, and then the rest of it will be super low. So it'll be kind of obvious, but I don't really care about like the proportions of whatever, because things don't always interact the way that you think they would. So it's really, for me, more about how loud is the stuff in the mix, like what's hitting 0. That's all I really look at it for. You know, that's the most important part of it. I look at it for that, and I look at it for like, how loud am I? Like, where's my luff setting at? And because I relatively know that I'm trying to be somewhere in the zone of like, you know, -6.8 to like -8.5, -9. Like in that zone, depending on genre, is all fine. Okay, so when I think about things in this way, it's just to check that I'm doing things right. And that's what I wanted you to realize is most beginners and intermediate level people, when they have something like this, and I tell you, this is the first thing you should put on. A lot of people tell you this. You mix into this stuff, which means if you don't put it on, you can't be mixing into it. So you're putting this on your mix bus from jump. And what you're doing is attack as slow as possible. This is what I'm just giving you basic settings a lot of people use. You could always change this, and people have different ones they like. This is called snake eyes. You notice how one's pointed this way, one's pointed this way. Dr. Dre liked this setting, and it sounds very aggressive and good. Slow attack is possible, all the way to the right. Fastest release is possible. Another thing people do is go to auto. A lot of people run the auto release. So you could do either one. They're both fine. You could also set the release closest to like the groove of the song if you want to mess with it a little. But for the sake of argument, for just keeping it moving, because until your ears are honed to what things sound like, what compression sounds like, which is relatively advanced, I'm telling you, you really will be causing more harm than good by even thinking about this a little bit. You should just set it to either auto or 0.1 in the beginning, and then you keep it moving. We'll get into this on another video about trying to hear the difference between the different things. But for now, you set this to either 1.5 or 2. It's generally like the lightest amount that you can really get out of this, where it's not super aggressive, crazy sounding. You know, you could go a little higher if you want, but for us, our purposes, 2, 1.5 works fine. Now, a lot of people will take the oversampling up on their limiter, on their compressor. Feel free to do whatever you want there. The other thing I just want everyone to note that's super important is this sidechain high-pass filter. This is what's called an internal sidechain high-pass filter. In other words, it's built into the compressor itself. That's what internal sidechain is. You cannot trigger it from another source the way you would trigger a compressor that's sitting on a bass, for example, to duck every time a kick hits. The compressor is being triggered off the kick. That's a compressor on the bass being triggered externally from something else, external, outside of that compressor. Whereas this is internal. This is not external. This is within the compressor itself. And as you turn it to, you know, if you put 125 there, it'll just allow more low end to get through, because that's how it works. In other words, you'll get more low end in your final mix that you're listening to if you leave this set to like 125 rather than off. So it's a very common feature on a lot of these updated versions of these plugins, because everyone loves it, everyone uses it. It's on my master bus processor that I use all the time. It's set to 125, so that's why I'm giving you guys this. You can set it to other numbers. I believe Mark Daniel Nelson's plugin has it set to 90, so you could pretty much anything from 90, 125. I've even seen like 150. People set it at 150. So you could do all sorts of stuff, but for our purposes, 125 is what we're going to do, because that's what I got going on here. Now, that's all I want to focus on today, because you're looking at this needle. As you're mixing, you'll be changing the volume of things constantly. You'll be making some things like bass, kick drums, snare, all that stuff comes up. Now, all of a sudden, this will be working way harder. So the goal for me is, how do I lower everything so that it doesn't hit this as hard? A good way to do it would be to take all your buses, like for example, I said all those guitars go to a guitar bus, all the drums go to drum buses, all the bass go to bass bus, all the keyboards go to keyboard bus. So because you got all your buses, you just group all the buses, you know, select them all, Apple G, then you just lower all the buses, and that sends less level into this. So as I'm mixing, I look at this and I see I'm jamming, 12 dB of gain reduction. I then lower all the buses. Now I get it lowered enough where it's 0 to 4 dB. I don't want to exceed 4, because as soon as I do, it'll be audible. Now, as a beginner, you may not hear it. So looking at this is going to be very helpful for you to really understand how much is there when you can't hear it. Especially, same with this. Looking at this will be very helpful for people who are beginners and intermediate people who don't have their room set up in a place, in a way that they could really hear the low end. You got to start looking at this to see when you're sitting at 0, because that's all messed up. As soon as you're sitting at 0, lower everything so that you're not. Okay? Very, very simple concept here. You got to look at this stuff because you can't hear it in your room, because your room acoustics probably aren't great. Your monitor situation's probably not been fine-tuned and sorted out. So you got to be looking at stuff like this, especially in the low end. Doesn't matter as much in the other areas, so I don't focus on them, because they never get close to 0 the way the low end does. The low end gets close to 0. All right, so they should not be sitting at 0. They could graze it, they could get close, but not sitting there. Now, as I mix, every time I make a series of decisions where the balance is different, I'm looking down. As I look down, I see, okay, now I'm hitting that thing at where it's supposed to be hit. Couple dB of gain reduction. Looking good. I keep it moving. I keep mixing. This is what I want to instill in you, is when you're mixing in a hybrid fashion, you actually get to see that with doing nothing. You just turn your head, it's right there. So you got to open this up. You got to look at it every time you've made a series of decisions where now the balance is different. You'll have a tendency, oh, I need guitars louder. You make the guitar bus louder. You want to make this lower. You make this louder. So you keep making things louder as you're mixing to hear them more. And you may then have to hit your group select, so all your buses are now selected, and then lower them all. If you don't constantly make the buses lower to control how much is going into this, you're never going to know, like, you're never going to get a good sounding mix because you're always hitting this too hard. So that's the balance, is like, when is the mix good? When you're hitting this only 0 to 4. Not if you're hitting it at 12 and the mix is good, you're just smushing it all. So you're making it where everything now is smushed and you don't hear it smushed, but it's too smushed. Trust me. All right. Now, this doesn't always apply, but like I said, on the beginner intermediate level, it applies. All right. So let's just go with that. Now, the only other thing I want to talk about before we get off this is make sure that needle's moving the right amount and that nothing is sounding out of balance. In other words, too loud. And the only way you'll know is by lowering the volume significantly all the time. I mix at 3 levels. Very loud for like the least amount of time. Like 1 to 5% of the mix is loud. That's it. While I'm mixing, 1 to 5% of the time I'm mixing is loud. Most of the time it's at a very moderate level. And then a lot of the time it's actually very, very low. And what I will always do is I'll make balanced decisions where, like, okay, I've EQ'd this kick, I've EQ'd the snare, I've EQ'd the guitar. Now, how loud? Okay, the guitars are the right volume with the vocals and it's at a moderate level, then I lower it. This is the beauty of having something that you could just reach out and grab, because as soon as you think about it, you got to do it. Whereas it's harder for everybody to go down to the master fader and then lower the master fader. Okay, now they go back, they're mixing again. Now they got to open this plugin up every time. Like, they got to go down, scroll down to find this, then go back to the mix, then go scroll down. It's harder than just looking over and seeing where it is. And then it's harder than just turning this knob down all the time. And I do it all the time. Can't stress it enough. I lower this constantly because when things are low, you can hear what sticks out. It's so clear when things are too loud if you make it low. So I'm going to lean on this forever till the day is long, like forever, till the day is over. We're going to always understand that the goal to when you're mixing is actually keep making it lower and make yourself feel like the mix is good when it's low. Make sure you hear everything. If you make it low and you hear the vocals crystal clear and the music's just a faint memory, you can't even really distinguish any music, but you hear the vocals crystal clear, you know your vocals are way too loud. All right? So I don't know why people fight this, but I don't care. This is how you mix. And I'll keep pushing it as long as I have to because it's what works. And people don't really want to mix low, so they don't like to hear it, but it's absolutely 1000% true. You lower the thing a lot, frequently, more frequently than you think you need to. You constantly do it while you're mixing. You make it much lower and see what happens, especially when you're focusing on things like bass. Make it low. You won't be able to hear the bass as well, but can you hear it at all? Because if you can kind of hear it, and then as you bring the song up, now it feels like it's the right volume. It might be the right volume. Whereas if you make it super low and the bass is sticking out, you know it's crazy loud. And if you make it low and you don't hear the bass at all, and as you make it louder, you still don't hear the bass at all. So it'll feel so light in the whole caboose. It's light. Feels like there's nothing there. Then it's probably nothing there. Also, get good with the headphones for that especially, because it'll be easier to hear what the bass is doing when you take your room out of the situation, because most people, like I said, they don't have their room figured out. It took me so long to get my room figured out, and I can't tell you how stressed I was. Like I have a shaved head situation. I'm what you call, bald, right? And I can't stress enough that I probably lost all the hair I have left just by trying to get my room right. So it is stressful beyond belief, and I got to tell you, it's one of those things where you just got to do what you got to do. And the bottom line is you put on the headphones, you hear the bass, and you may have to spend weeks and weeks and weeks making it where your room sounds good to you, where it actually translates to the car. Okay, now I hear bass, And it sounds clear and good, but man, was that hard. And it's not something I could just tell you how to do, because everyone's room is different and everyone's speakers are different and everyone hears differently. So it ain't no easy fix for that. All right. But get a pair of headphones you're comfortable with and hear what the low end is doing on stuff you like and put on your stuff. And that'll help you out a lot. All right. So I don't want to go too crazy. I think we'll end it there today. Any questions, throw them in the comments. Difference makers, come through, do your thing. Drop anything you guys think is super helpful that other people need to know. I can't put everything in every video, but I got more videos coming in like this. I can't stress enough how important this thing is, because I did it 100 times today while I was mixing, and I was like, why doesn't everybody stress this more than they do? Everyone thinks it's like a fancy trick or a plug-in thing. No, this is why your mixes aren't good. You're hitting everything too hard or not hard enough. You're not looking at it the way you should constantly. How much you're hitting the needle on the mix bus compressor, very critical. I hope you guys dug it. This is one of those videos that I had to drop, because as soon as you build this habit of looking at what's going on, now all of a sudden you get more consistent, better mixes like crazy, because you won't be in a position where everything's a guess. That's the thing. When you're early stages, you don't have the ears yet to know what you're hearing. So even though people definitely will tell you mix with your ears, not with your eyes, it's probably the most common phrase in mixing, you got to get your ears in a shape. And honestly, you need to look at stuff like the VU meter on a plugin like an SSL bus comp to know what's really happening before your ears are there. Once your ears get in a position, you won't need to look as much, but you'll hear it, then you'll look, and you'll already know what you should be doing. That's the thing. The pros still look, but they know what's supposed to happen before they look. And then they look to confirm what they're thinking. So you'll get there. I promise. Trust me. It's easier than it seems, all right? It sounds like a lot. It's just a lot to remember, but it's easier than it seems. You got this. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. Throw something in the comments. I really appreciate it. More videos to come, and anything you drop in there that you think is something people need to know, maybe I'll make a video on that, all right? It helps me out. Great ideas you guys give me. Talk to you guys soon. See you guys later. You guys got this. Take it easy.